Okay, this is part one of a series of videos in which I'm going to show you how to build a logic template within Bloodhound to find regular divergence between MACDs and price. MACD BB lines. You could really substitute any oscillator you want for the MACD BB lines, but for this example we're going to use the T3 MACD BB lines. Now this is a Unirenko 173 chart of crude. It is basically, for all intents and purposes, identical to RJ's Renko spectrum. Let me just show you the settings. So the tick trend is 1, tick reversal 7, tick up and offset of 3. This will mirror RJ's Renko spectrum 4-1. Okay, the reason I'm not using RJ's spectrum bars is because I don't own them, and this is free. So at any rate, I'm only using 5 days back, the least number of days while you're building a template is ideal, because then it doesn't have to, then Bloodhound doesn't have to go through, you know, a ton of data before it can calculate all of the different parameters and spit out your output. So I'm only going to use 5 days back so that Bloodhound works as efficiently as possible. Now, the indicator that we have to use to find the divergence between price and the indicator is this indicator that comes with Bloodhound. So if you'll open up your indicators panel, let's see, just type in here the S key, hit the S key, it'll take you down to the SI indicators, and this is the one that we want, the SiSwingsHighsLows. So I'm going to add that. It comes default 313. I've kind of changed the settings a little bit. Let me show you exactly what I've done. Now, if you'll take the time and actually build a chart while you're watching this video, exactly how I'm doing it, then you might just retain this information. Otherwise, you're going to watch it and then, you know, you're going to forget about it. So it would serve you well to actually build a chart and follow along with me. So let's see, these are my settings. I've changed, well, let me add the thing to the chart first. So this dark violet line is the widest bottom, so it's going to be the lowest low within the past number of swings that you've determined up here. The widest top is the highest high within those said number of swings. I've changed the widest plots to be dots with a width of 3 to differentiate them from the tightest tops and bottoms. I think the tightest tops and bottoms that I have here are the defaults that come from Bloodhound. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set this to 4, and let's set this to like 9 so I can really explain this indicator. Basically, this video is going to be all about explaining this indicator, because you have to understand it in order to find divergence. You have to know how this thing works. So it's set to the past 9 swings back at this point. Now I need to mark these lines. Okay. Hotkeys don't seem to work while I'm recording video. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I guess that is. Count it. Yeah, I guess it is. Yep. Okay. You know, if you change the setting, let's change it to 7, then it will probably filter out this 2-bar pivot. Let's change it to 7. Let's change it to 6 and see if it'll filter it out. Yep. So probably 5 will even filter it out. So basically the higher, no, 5 didn't get it, but 6 did filter it out. So the higher this swing sensitivity is, the larger the swing will have to be for it to be picked up by the indicator. So that it'll filter out the small swings, basically, the higher this number gets. Higher the number gets, the more of the smaller swings you're going to be filtering out. So let's just forget about that, change it back to 4. this is what I want to really use to teach you how this thing works. Number of swings. So we're looking at the past 9 pivots. Really, we're looking at the past 9 swings, but those swings are defined by their pivot points. Okay, so this is swing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So out of all of these swings, what is the highest high? The highest pivot high is right there, right? So that is our widest top. Widest top is the highest high within the determined number of pivots. Okay, and likewise, the widest bottom is the lowest low. Okay, I think that's fairly straightforward. Now, the one that's kind of tricky, and unless you really understand how this thing works, it's kind of hard to define. But it's taken me a little while, but I can I can define it now. So this is the widest top, the cyan line, and this is this is the tightest top. What did I say? The widest. So this is the tightest top, and this is the tightest bottom. It gets confusing. Tightest, widest, tops, bottoms. I mean, it's, you know, but there's 4 of them. Okay, you have the widest top, the widest bottom. Okay, now the lines are the tightest. So what does tightest mean? Well, the tightest top is that pivot high that is closest to the widest bottom. Okay, think about that. The tightest top is the pivot high closest to the widest bottom. Pause it, think about that, understand that. That will save you all sorts of time in trying to figure this thing out. The tightest top is the pivot closest to the widest bottom. Okay, so out of all of these pivots, which pivot high is closest to the low? Well, it's that one. Okay, well, that's marked the tightest top. Out of all of these pivots, which pivot low is closest to this pivot? Well, obviously it's not this one, it's this one. So this pivot low is closest to the tightest top. I'm sorry. This pivot low is closest to the widest top, the highest high, right? The widest top is the highest high. The widest bottom is the lowest low. So that's the one that it's marked right here. Does that make sense? Sure hope it does. So this is the tightest bottom, and this is the tightest top. Tightest. Once again, I'm gonna say this over and over because I know this stuff is hard. For those of you that are, you know, more technologically advanced, this is going to be boring. But I know there's a lot of you that are still scratching your heads right now. It's fine. Pause it. Think about it. The tightest top is always going to be the pivot high closest to the lowest low. The tightest bottom is always going to be the pivot low closest to the highest high, which is the widest top. So let me just add a few more pivots to the equation. Let's say 12, and then we'll see how this thing kind of shifts a little bit. So you see how the numbers have shifted. Now, let's see, that's 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, or no, it's counting this one as, it's counting that as a pivot. So that's 12 right there. So let me just do this. Let me just black out the rest of. Black out the rest of that. Dang it. And obviously this isn't very professional, but at least you'll learn a couple of concepts here. So we're looking at these past 12 pivots. Out of all these pivots, where's the highest high? It's that one, right? Well, that's what it's marked as the widest top. And the lowest low, still that pivot. So that is the widest bottom. Now, where is the tightest top? Well, it's still that pivot, because that is still the pivot high closest to the bottom. But now, which one has shifted? The tightest bottom. So which pivot is closer to this? this highest high, this widest top? Is it this one? Or by one tick, is it this one? It's actually this one, because it's one tick closer than this one is. Okay, so it's marking this as the tightest bottom. It's the tightest pivot low to the high, to the widest top. So it is the tightest bottom to the widest top. And that is as simple as I can explain this. Okay, so that is this indicator in a nutshell. Now what we're going to do is when I add, let me go ahead and add the MACD. I'm going to add the MACD to the chart just so you see it real quick. Now we need to add this indicator over the MACD BB lines. Let me change this to the way that we're going to actually use it. We're going to set it to 4. And I'll come back and actually, you know what? Let me explain that first. Let me remove that. So now I want to explain this to you because this is important. So as it's moving down, as price action is moving down, we're getting lower lows, so we're getting new widest bottoms plots. So as we come down, we put in this pivot. We put in this pivot on this bar. Close over this bar, we put in this pivot. Okay, let me just take that to the right edge. So we're looking for a pivot. Okay, right there, we're going to start finding that pivot right there. We found it. Okay, so on that bar, it's signaling that pivot. Now when I change this, for some reason, when I change this to 3, now you can see at the top too, we found the pivot there on the second bar, and it's marking the actual high tick of that candle, of that wick. The tip of that black line, right, the wick of the bar. So when I change this to 3, swing sensitivity to 3, you'll see the lows that it's picking up are actually the low of that previous body of the bar. I don't know why it does this. I mean, I don't think it's really a bug per se in the indicator. It's just the way the indicator works. I don't know why, but for the lows, it's actually marking on the reversal bar. So at the close of the reversal bar, at the close of this green bar, when we've changed from red to green, that's a reversal in price. That's a closing price inflection. Okay, at the close of that new green bar, it's marking the low as being the previous bar. So the previous low of the body of the bar is what it's actually marking as a low, rather than the low of that wick of the actual first green bar. So why it's doing that, I don't know. But now that's why I've set this to a swing sensitivity of 4 for price, and only for price. When I set it on the MACDs, I'm actually going to use a 2. I'll show you why in a minute. So you can see how it moved out. We change that back. Look at this one too. It'll move now up to here. It'll move up 1 tick and over 1 bar when I change this to 3. Let's see. But the tops stay the same. So going from 3 to 4 really only affects the widest bottoms. I don't know. Well, I mean, I'm sure it affects, well, I don't know. But I know it affects the widest bottoms. Yeah, it does also affect the tightest plots. So yeah, I mean, that's the way I'm going to use it. 414. Now, when I set this to 3, let me explain this. There are 4 lines, right? So it really wants to look at 4 pivots. But when you set this to 3, let me set it to 1. You see what it does? It combines the tightest tops and the tightest bottoms with the widest tops and bottoms. So this is basically working like the swings indicator that comes with Bloodhound. Swing. So let me add that. Apply it. But you can see the swing indicator. Let me just remove this. The swing indicator will actually backfill to the pivot. Okay, so let me see if we can take it out to live. I'd like to see when this bar, so it won't signal that this is actually a swing high until probably the second, maybe even the third bar. But then it'll backfill all the way to the actual pivot. So if we could get lucky and see it as this happens, hopefully it'll come down another 5-6 ticks. I hate to sit here and just waste time like this, but well, anyway, you can just take my word for it. When it comes down after 2, maybe 3 bars, that's when you actually get the signal of the indicator, but then it backfills all the way to the pivot high. So yeah, we're not going to get it. So that's how it works. It was basically, this indicator was basically designed around, well, I can't say that for sure, but I mean it works similarly to that swings indicator that comes with NinjaTrader, but it also adds in the capability of looking at as many swings back as you want. So really pretty cool. So if I set this to 2 instead, then you'll see that the lines will actually leave. They're still combined, but rather than being totally combined like this, where they don't send the tightest bottom and the tightest top to the next plot as a connecting line, when you change it to 2, they do connect the plots. So then when you set it to 3, so now it's going to look at the past 3 swings, okay? So we're looking at this plot, and I guess that plot. Yeah, let me make this a little bit clearer. So we're looking at this plot, that pivot low, this pivot high, and that pivot low. Okay, so you can see there is the tightest bottom. Here's the widest bottom, because that's clearly the lowest low. And this is the widest top. Now, since we're only looking at 3 swings, one of these tightest lines is going to be combined with one of the widest plots, okay? So in this case, it is the tightest top because we don't have another pivot high. All we have are 3 swings. We have a widest bottom, a widest top, and then we have a tightest bottom. We don't have a tightest top. If I included 4, then it would pick this up as the tightest top. You see? See how this line stops right here? So we're really only looking at this plot, the current bar. And the current bar says the widest top and the tightest top are the same. So if you want to find a higher low or a lower high, you really want it set up like this. You want it set up to look at only 3 swings. Because you can see when we have a higher low here, what happens? The tightest bottom moves up 1. Okay, so at the close of this bar, right here, at the close of that bar, this tightest bottom moved up. So those of you familiar with logic, I think you're probably already figuring out how we decipher when we have a high or low. We're looking at the tightest bottom of the current bar compared to the tightest bottom 1 bar ago. So if the tightest bottom 1 bar ago is lower than the tightest bottom of the current bar, then we have a higher low. Okay, and vice versa for lower highs. Okay, I know this can be confusing, but I hope I'm doing a good job of explaining this. So I really want you to understand this, because this is really a quite invaluable tool for defining price action and divergences and all kinds of stuff. So now for what I want to do, I'm going to set this to 4 because I want basically when there is a high, let's say, let me find a good example. Like let's say the pivots, there were like a couple of pivots, there was maybe one pivot. Let me find an actual example so I don't have to talk theoretical. And that's too many pivots. Like right here. You see how we have a couple of pivots? I'm looking at this right here. That is probably a divergence between MACD and price. Maybe, I don't know. But maybe it is. In order for me to measure that divergence, if I were to set this to 3 swings back, it's going to, this tightest bottom plot is going to go up here, and it's going to kind of screw up my my swings. So let me just show you what I mean. I'm going to set that to 3. Well, it didn't really do it, did it? I guess that's not a good example. No, that's not really a good example. Okay, well hopefully I can find an example that'll actually keep me from looking like an idiot here. Alright, let's see. Well, okay, sorry, I just found one, so but let me just make sure. So I'm going to add the BB lines, MACD BB lines, and see if we actually have a divergence here. Yeah, we do, thank goodness. Okay, so if you wanted to still call this a divergence even though you have a pivot in between, if you had it set to, because okay, let me explain how we find divergence first of all. We want to look at this pivot high compared to this pivot high in price, and we want to look at this pivot high compared to this pivot high in the MACD, right? So we're going to have all sorts of different settings for this SiSwingsHighsLows indicator. Now, to be able to skip this pivot in between, if we were to have this set at 3, we wouldn't be able to do that. So rather than having one set to 3 and then another one set to 4 and combining all these different solvers so that we can find every single case of divergence, we just go ahead and set it to, because as you can see, it's looking at this pivot now. See? So price is being compared. Okay, I need to qualify what I'm saying here. How we look at this pivot while price is at this pivot is we measure price compared to being above or below the widest top or the widest bottom. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward. So in order to keep from looking at this pivot in between the two larger pivots, we need to eliminate this swing. Okay, so when we set it to 4 swings back, it's going to then find the highest high at this point as being this widest. It's going to find the widest top as being this highest high rather than this one when price is trading right here. I hope that makes sense. I don't know if I'm doing a very good job explaining this, but this is all going to make sense in the next video, so just hang with me. I know I kind of botched this explanation just now, but I'm not going to trash this video because I've done that too many times. So So does that now make sense, hopefully? I hope it does. So we're going to use these settings for the price, 414. Okay, now we need to add the SI swings onto the MACD. So in order to do that, we add it to the panel. And instead of looking at price, we want to change the input series. We want the input series to be the MACD BB lines. Okay, so then we open up the indicators and come down to T3, MACD BB lines. And then in the panel, we want to overlay that in panel 2. And then we just add it to the chart. Now I'm going to set this to 2, 3, 1, 2, because I want it really tight. I want it to find the very first lower. I want it to find the pivot on the very first bar that it happens, the very first MACD dot. So you can see it does that with a setting of 2. Here it's not quite, it's on the second, but for the most part it catches it right away. And it's on the second on a couple of them, but you can see the first one, it got the first down dot. Here it got the second one, here it got the second one. So we use it on the MACD to find higher lows and lower highs in price. Okay, so that's going to be the next video. So this should wrap up the explanation for this SI swings indicator. I don't want to spend any more time on it. I'm hoping that you've kind of understood what how this thing works and why I'm using it to find divergence. Okay, so next video will actually show you how to build the template in which we can find regular bearish and bullish divergence.